T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
I am the tiger, dancing through the fire. I am the champion, and you're gonna hear me roar.
Good afternoon. It's Up Your Vibe Radio. I'm Paula Kallick, your host, and I am also a life strategist, a trainer, a supervisor, and today I am bringing you Liz Findlay from the London area, and she's going to talk to you about women's health. Over to you, Liz. What is your story?
Good afternoon, Paula. I'd like to tell you about my success with endometriosis and how I've managed to get to the point of being completely symptom-free. And I know that my story can help other women out there. So I started off pretty much from the word go with pretty painful periods. But it was just explained to me that that's part of the natural womanhood and this is what you deal with. And they were quite debilitating, and I wasn't aware that it wasn't meant to be that sore. So I was actually only diagnosed at the age of 18.
So what is the endometriosis, Liz? And you talked about fibrosis as well. You had a dual diagnosis.
Yes, so endometriosis is when the blood lining of the uterus is found outside of the uterus as well. And it can grow on all sorts of different organs. Mine was actually wrapped around my kidney tubes. It had spread to my colon. Now, the thing is, each month when you get your period, this tissue also tries to shed, if you will, even though it doesn't really go anywhere, but you get debilitating pain throughout your whole abdomen. And with some women, it can be not just the period, it can be throughout the month. It can make intercourse very painful, and it can even lead to infertility. It really is problematic, and there's so many women who go undiagnosed.
So does this affect women who are menstruating, or can it affect older women as well?
They say that the most common sufferers are women of childbearing age. And usually it starts off, so when you first start your period, apparently you wouldn't normally have the severe symptoms. It's actually later on because it grows. This tissue is designed for a baby to grow in it. And so each month it grows too, but it can't shed anywhere and go anywhere.
Fibrosis is something that I'm familiar with because I had that when I was in my 20s, which was treated. So can you explain to our audience what fibrosis is?
Yes, because I actually, they found some fibrosis in my uterus. So when they say it is cancerous tissue, it's not cancer in the sense that our society knows it now, and that, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go for chemo or radiation. It's cancerous in that it's tissue that's growing that should not be there. It should not be multiplying. So they could just remove it and it was fine. But yes, it's basically tissue that shouldn't be there.
Gosh, so Liz, you're an energy healer for people and animals, and this is what your experience with endometriosis and fibrosis is actually what put you on your path to becoming an energy healer. And your diagnosis was 8 years ago, I believe?
Oh no, more than that. It was when I was 18, so I'm now 34. What ended up happening at school is I was very fortunate in that mobile phones started being introduced. I'm from South Africa, so I was in school in South Africa. It seemed a bit extravagant, but my mom did get me a mobile phone. But what I was using it for is whenever I started my period at school, my symptoms of the endometriosis is that I would feel faint, I would go pale, I would sometimes vomit. And so I would literally just phone my mom and she'd come fetch me from school.
It sounds absolutely horrendous, Liz. I can't even imagine how you coped with it. Really, I can't. And on top of this, you've had extensive stage 4 surgery?
Yes, so eventually I did get the diagnosis, and my initial surgeon, gynecologist said, well, let's just wait a little bit with the surgery. But I'm just very thankful I then moved surgeons because I wanted the new method of the laser, not the burning. And he said, gosh, this is stage 4. We've got to operate as soon as possible.
So when you talk about stages, what is stage 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Stage 4 is the worst.
Oh my gosh.
And it had spread. He sent me for a colonoscopy, not the most pleasant time of my life. I lost most of my dignity. But it was brilliant because it showed them that it spread into my colon. But he took the decision that let's just deal with the worst with the first surgery, and we'll look at the colon with the second surgery. So when I had the surgery, that's when they found the fibrosis in my uterus. It was such large clumps around the back of my uterus that they couldn't just use laser. They had to cut away and then use laser. And he said to me, look, it was so bad, you're going to have to come back for this same surgery every 2 years for the rest of your life.
And this is where you cheated the surgeon out of your business, because of course that was not to be, was it, Liz?
Exactly, because now I should have had 5 surgeries, and I've avoided all further ones. I've only had that initial one.
So what is it that you did in order to avoid these further surgeries?
Well, I didn't knowingly do anything. My parents and I actually just resolved ourselves to the fact that this is how it will have to be. So it was actually a completely different reason that I ended up getting into Reiki, and I did my first Reiki training back in 2010. And in between Reiki level 1 and 2, they advise that you give yourself Reiki every day. And so I was being very dedicated, and I actually had intentions of the Reiki helping me for something else. And to be honest, I wasn't really finding the relief of the other thing, but I kept to it. You know, I was still finding general improvements in my life. But it was when I went for the checkup with my surgeon, my family and I, we were fully expecting him to say, you know, right, when's the next theatre date for the surgery?
And how long was that after the original surgery?
Oh, look, I was supposed to have it after 2 years. I pushed it because I couldn't actually take off work for so long. So I pushed it to the 3-year mark, and this is why I thought, it's going to be booked in immediately. But he had no medical explanation for why it was under control, and he admitted this. Good for him. He just looked at me absolutely gobsmacked, and he even pointed his finger at me and said, I don't know what you've been doing, but you keep doing it.
That is amazing. So what do you attribute then to your amazing success in not having to go for further surgeries?
Well, look, back then, that was 100% the Reiki, where it put it under control. It wasn't gone. I wasn't symptom-free, but it was under control that I didn't need further surgery. And so definitely energy healing, Reiki, all of that is what I attribute that to. Further on down the line, that I ended up doing a pretty intense diet for damaged gut lining, and they call it leaky gut.
Oh, yes, I have a book on that, actually.
Yes, and I didn't even think of the endometriosis when I was doing this. And while doing it, I suddenly noticed that when I was having a period, it wasn't quite as bad. I was taking pain pills, but then I noticed that if I forgot to take them, because they were suggesting to me that before the period starts, before the pain sets in, start taking the pain pills.
So was this by following the suggestions made in the Leaky Gut book?
Well, no, it was doctors and gynecologists who said stay on the pill, take the pain pills before the period starts, all of that. But then I noticed when I did this hectic diet to heal leaky gut, if I forgot to start taking the pain pills, I wasn't in such debilitating pain. You know, I then started trying it out. Can I maybe not take as many? Instead of taking 2, can I take 1? And slowly, I started getting the confidence.
So is this why you say the recovery plan are like pieces of a puzzle? There's not just one solution. So it's not just about the food that you eat. What else?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone's got to find what fits with them. I mean, I've had the most weird and wonderful therapies, experiences, you name it. I've tried color therapy. I've tried all sorts of things, dowsing, you name it. And I found what works for me. But what I'm talking about today is what seems to be working for my clients as well with the endometriosis. In that what seems to be a common thread is the combination of the Reiki, or if you'd like to call it energy healing, and then mainly cutting out gluten. And so that was one of my points, in that it's been attributed to many illnesses and ailments. I know there are many people out there.
Audience, sorry, people might not understand what you mean by gluten. So what is this one main food that you talk about that is the root cause of all illness? I know you've said gluten, but it is wheat, isn't it? Gluten is wheat.
Yes, well, definitely wheat. But I personally believe that it would be gluten as a whole. I found more results when I went gluten-free. I was initially wheat-free, and it just got better going gluten-free, and with my clients as well.
What sorts of foods contain gluten?
So wheat is gluten, but it's also rye and barley. Now, you've got to be careful with oats, because oats is not actually gluten, but you get the cross-contamination in two ways. Firstly, it could be in a factory that handles gluten.
Okay.
Or otherwise, what they're doing is, with some of these fields, is they do crop rotation. And so they grow oats some of the time, but other times they grow wheat. And this is problematic for celiacs or people like us who might be very sensitive to gluten. And so that's why you would need to then start looking for gluten-free oats.
And of course, wheat was introduced into the food line, I believe, about 3,000 years ago. I may be wrong. So in terms of human evolution, it's not a long time for us to accept wheat and be able to digest it, and for the body to take care of that part of it. So this is probably, why we're unable to, why some people are very sensitive to wheat. I have tried all of the wheat products myself as well. And I know you've got an amazing story, but for myself and my 6 weeks challenge, in less than 2 weeks, I've dropped 2.5 kilos.
That's fabulous.
You dropped a lot more though, didn't you?
Yes, when I first went wheat free, I actually lost 10 kilograms within 2 weeks, and I wasn't starving myself. And it was explained to me that gluten, and of course that includes wheat, creates inflammation in the body. And so some people just deal with it and cope a lot better than others. But
particularly in the gut though, isn't it? We're talking mostly about the gut.
Yes, but it will create inflammation throughout the entire body. So there have been, some people who are suffering with inflammation in the joints and all of that. There's some healthcare practitioners who have suggested we'll possibly try going gluten-free, and you might find some relief. Again, it's not the only cause of inflammation in the joints, but some people have found a benefit and relief from that.
So generally going gluten-free can help a lot of symptoms throughout your whole body.
Yeah, in the research that I've done, this is what it's saying. And what they explain is that, as you said, it was only recent in our whole time here on the planet. It's only been recently introduced, the grains.
Yes.
And so some people are not coping as well as others, because we're hoping for evolutionary processes to take place with our digestive system. And it takes millions of years, not thousands. I think they started farming 12,000 years ago. But one of the problems with wheat is that they started crossbreeding it. It actually used to be very special and expensive to buy. It wasn't so widely available, and it was farmers who started, if you want to call it, crossbreeding it, to get a slightly thicker sheath, to protect it against pests, a little bit bigger. And that's why wheat is a lot cheaper. It's easier to grow and all of that. But with that come problems.
Is that genetically modified that you're referring to then? Genetically modified? GMO?
Look, not in the modern sense that we're talking about today, but they call it a sort of early version of genetically modifying, because they're crossbreeding. But it wasn't, because this was done, look, I might be a little bit off with the dates, but, maybe 100 or a couple of 100 years ago. It's in our recent history. So they weren't doing anything in laboratories then. It was really just farmers choosing which ones they want to then grow to slightly alter things.
Yes.
But as that then goes down our digestive tracts, you might not be celiac. You might not actually have an allergy to wheat, but it creates damage as it's going